Good morning. Happy Sunday. Thank you for watching Sunday Kickoff. I am your host, Fidel Barraza. Alongside with me, Kendall Whitley, Jerry Martinez, Coach Hugh Jackson, Isaac Durham, Sunil Blue, and Walter Stringer. How are you guys doing?
Great.
I
Wonderful.
well, Coach, I see you rocking that Lambs of God merch. I see you.
Absolutely. All day, every day.
Hey, first of all, I just want to make sure everyone is good and safe, and also that you guys enjoyed your Thanksgiving holiday.
Oh yeah.
Yes, definitely. Food, football, and family. Wonderful.
That's
Yes.
what we do.
And this show is presented by Grand Lighthouse Coffee. Make sure you go to grandlighthousecoffee.com. Use promo code EastWest to get 10% off your purchase. And of course, Grand Leyenda Tequila. Make sure you go to grandleyenda.com for more details. All right, guys, a lot to get to. Crazy week. Started with some football on Thursday, but first let's recap last week. Kendall, let me get your thoughts on last weekend.
Man, the Los Angeles Rams, they for real, man. We seen what they did this past Monday against Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. It was tearing them up, man. I'm loving what I'm seeing from the Los Angeles Rams.
Jerry.
Well, I think that the Super Bowl is going to come in through the AFC division. So, I mean, when you stop, you look at it, it's too much inconsistency in the NFC.
Coach.
Joe Burrow getting injured. That was something that was very enlightening for a young player. First pick of the draft, a guy who you need to protect gets hurt. Boy, that was really disappointing. Week 11.
Isaac.
The Colts really impressed me. They showed some resiliency, down 28-14 at half, pretty much controlling the whole second half, time of possession, and coming out with the win, forcing that fumble in the end, kicking that game-winning field goal, just kind of opens my eyes like the Colts are for real this year.
Do you think that DeForest Buckner, since he's not going to play today, right, because of the COVID?
Yeah, he's out.
Do you think that that's going to affect that defense?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. Derrick Henry on the other side, that's a huge loss.
Sunil.
I think the Colts will win this week, too.
Yeah, actually, Isaac had mine too. The Colts definitely stood out. They've been slept on. So shout out to Alia for never losing hope in her Colts. But right now they're tied for the AFC South with the Titans. So this matchup is definitely going to be seeing who takes the AFC.
Walter.
Yeah, for me, it's Tampa Bay and how bad they look against good competition. Down the stretch, all they have is good competition, and if you get to the playoffs, everybody's good. So Tampa's got a lot of things to work on right now. And I said before, I think a few weeks ago, that Tampa, to me, they needed that number one seed more than anybody else. And from the looks of things, they won't have that number one seed. And they're currently looking at probably going on the road. So Tampa's got a lot of things to work on currently.
And I learned Taysom Hill can play a little bit of quarterback, right? He looked all right last weekend. I mean, better than expected. So, and then also the Rams defense is pretty good. So that's what stood out to me last week. All right, quick recap of some Thanksgiving action. Houston at Detroit. Houston dominated the Lions 41-25. And then also the Washington football team went into Dallas and got the win 41-16. All right, guys. A lot of news, a lot of injuries going around. This coronavirus, it looks like it's here to stay for now. So let's check in with Sania with those updates.
Yeah, guys, definitely have a lot of different COVID updates and a lot of different injury updates. I'm going to start with the injuries, though, first, just to kind of give you the basic rundown on that. For the Falcons right now, Julio Jones and Dante Fowler Jr. and Todd Gurley are all questionable for this game. Julio Jones and Dante Fowler Jr. are both struggling with that hamstring. That hamstring injury is something that's pretty consistent throughout the league. And I'm going to jump forward.
Should be right back. Technical difficulties. We apologize about that.
It's all good. But
But
have you seen all the penalties coming down?
Yeah.
All right, you're back. Cool.
Oh, okay, I'm back. Okay, awesome. Nick Foles is doubtful, which that's okay. And, but also for the Cincinnati Bengals, of course, we're not going to have, and as Coach mentioned, of course, we're not going to have Joe Burrow as quarterback. But Brandon Allen, who came up from the practice squad, he's set to be quarterback this week. That's going to be very interesting. An interesting situation, and I'm really hoping that this offensive line will turn things around, but we'll see how that goes. Mike Thomas is also doubtful for the Bengals. Now for the Browns, they're just out there out of safety, and they're out a cornerback and Denzel Ward. For the Cowboys, they played earlier this week. For the Broncos, you know what? I'm going to just come back to the Broncos because the Broncos have a whole situation that we got to dive into. So I'm going to come back to the Broncos. Goodness gracious. But for the Green Bay Packers, just a lot of questionable injuries, especially in that cornerback and running back position. Josh Jackson is questionable. Tyler Ervin is questionable. And for the Colts, they won't have their center in Ryan Kelly, and they won't have a linebacker. They're going to need to have a strong defense, though, to make sure that they are on top to take, hopefully take the AFC South for them Titans. But the Jacksonville Jaguars, they still will not have Gardner Minshew. They still will not have Sidney Jones. And DJ Chark Jr. is also going to be out. Now, the Raiders, they're looking questionable, but they're overall okay for right now. The Los Angeles Chargers are missing a linebacker and a cornerback, so they're going to need some help on defense. Now, the Miami Dolphins will not have their guard in Solomon Kinley, but they will also be losing.
And then real quick, Todd Gurley has been ruled out officially.
I think Sam Darnold also is going to play today, isn't he?
Oh, wow.
Have quite a few questionable injuries. As well. Kind of the list goes on. So for the Saints, though, they won't have Dante Harris. They won't have Derek Kelly. They won't have Ty Montgomery and Andres Pete, all out for this matchup this week. The Eagles will not have Rudy Ford or Lane Johnson, both out. Rudy Ford, again, another hamstring injury. And for the Seahawks, which will be Monday night's game, Brandon Shell, the offensive tackle, will be out, and running backer Travis Homer will not see the field. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tanner Hudson, and Jamel Dean will also be out. So they'll need help on both sides of the ball, filling in that cornerback position and that tight end position. Now for the Titans, Michael Pruitt, a tight end, not there. Dory Jackson, cornerback, not there. And Adam Humphries, not there as a wide receiver. So that's your major outs and questionables for this injury update, for your basic injury update. But let's get into this COVID situation, because up to 18 Ravens have tested positive for the virus, which we know that's why the Steelers-Ravens game was pushed back all the way to Tuesday. And we know in the NFL, Tuesday is hopefully a last resort because we don't have football on Tuesdays. But that includes Lamar Jackson and the backup quarterback, Trace McSorley. So that's problematic for them, naturally wanting all of them to be safe and healthy. But a total of 20 players are now on the reserve COVID list. That doesn't mean all 20 of them are tested positive. I want to make sure that's clear. But also for the Steelers, running back James Conner tested positive. And this is going to be a storyline that's interesting to follow. Naturally, again, wanting his health to be okay. But Conner is a recent cancer survivor. So we haven't seen, at least major news hasn't broken out about an athlete who has had a serious previous medical situation such as that. And they also are down a coach. They're down a defensive end and a defensive tackle. And the NFL has actually ordered teams to close all in-person activities on Monday and Tuesday. So things may be looking different even in terms of practices. The Saints were fined $500,000 and they lose a draft pick after massless celebration in the locker room when they beat Tom Brady and the Bucks in Week 9. So all that partying kind of came back to backfire. Also, another major fine is the Patriots. $350,000 for COVID-19 violations back in October, around the time that Stephon Gilmore and Cam Newton tested positive. But guys, we already know that one that's hitting it hard is the Broncos without any eligible quarterbacks. And I saw some tweets saying that they were looking everywhere for a quarterback. But that is my overall injury update, as well as coronavirus update. So a lot to get into, guys.
All right. Well, thank you, Sonia. I think the other thing too that we're not talking enough of are the coaches and the players, because Mark Ingram and J.K. Dobbins tested positive on Monday. They just had a game on Sunday. So this virus doesn't appear right away. I believe they say it's like a 14-week gap. I'm not a scientist or anything like that, but that's from what I read. That's what they say. So that's the other interesting thing about that, right? It might take a little bit for them to come up positive. But this Broncos situation is just insane. Coach, if you were the head coach of the Denver Broncos, what would you do?
I fire myself right away. No, I just obviously I'm sure you guys heard all the reports and how Denver tried to do everything they could to even get their quality control coach signed player. All four of their guys. It seems to me like the league is disappointed in them because they're not even considering moving the game till Tuesday or anything like that, which would have given at least one of their quarterbacks a chance to get back because they were all so close to each other and not one. But my biggest concern is for the other players on the team. So this quarterback, the receiver, plays quarterback. Let's say he throws a ball and Judy gets hurt.
Yeah.
Or Fant gets hurt. I mean, that who's going to be responsible for that? Or if anybody, who's off the lineman get hurt because of some unforeseen reason. I just think there's a lot of liability here in this situation that is very.
Yeah, and I think we also have to mention that none of the quarterbacks for the Denver Broncos were wearing their bracelets, so that's why also they're going to be fined as well, I'm sure. All right, Coach. Go ahead.
We've been seeing all the fines, and it's insane. I can only imagine what Broncos and who else, the Ravens. I mean,
those fines be huge.
Yeah, they're huge. I think I saw one was like $350,000, and then what was it, 7th round pick, right?
Yeah. So we just watched, like you said, we just watched the team get fined $500,000 and a draft pick for celebrating a win.
That's $500,000. The NFL is
in their locker room together, and they're fining them.
What do you do?
Yeah, and also, and going back to Fidel, what you said about coaches, the Steelers quarterback coach, Matt Canada, tested positive for COVID. So seeing how that plays, because naturally when players are used to their coaches being there, used to them prepping for games, and for the Steelers and the Ravens, that's a big-time game to prep for, and a big-time game where you need your quarterback coach, you need your defensive coach, you need all of your coaches there. But if you don't have that in-person connection that you usually would have during practice, it's going to affect the games.
Well, in Cincinnati, again, I mentioned this last week, there's 3 coaches, one that's been out for the last 3 weeks. And we don't even talk about what his symptoms are and why he's out so long.
Yeah.
And he's a secondary coach. I don't get that. It's talked about in the local media, but it's not talked about.
Yeah, and COVID doesn't just have to last for 14 days or whatever the time frame that most scientists, it could be longer than that.
Yeah, so I have a question for you guys. I'm going to start off with Coach. Will the NFL be able to finish the season?
I think it's going to be tough, though. I just think this is the weekend where everybody's eyes are opened to a lot of different things, like from players, to moving games, to different players having to play different positions. Now, I think it's just we've been on this and we've had discussions. It is getting worse and worse and worse. And I think they're going to have to do something here very soon.
Sunil.
Yeah, they're definitely going to have to do something here very soon. I know that there were talks about having to amend the season and change it a little bit if they have to cancel some games due to COVID, and then possibly adding 16 teams to the playoffs instead of, I believe, 14. So, but at the end of the day, you can only play the playoffs if you have healthy players to play in the playoffs. So if COVID doesn't care about playoffs or anybody's overall ability to get on that field. So I think that they should have which is too late to say, but I think they should have had that break a few weeks ago when we talked about this first time on the show. Viewers can go back and watch that show. But at the end of the day, it's not looking too great, to be honest.
Walter.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I feel that, well, first of all, we all saw this coming. I think we had a conversation about this before the season even started. We saw it coming. We just didn't really know how the league was going to weather the storm. It's disappointing because they had the longest amount of time to get prepared for this, going back to the beginning of the season. And in my opinion, I think the NFL's arrogance is going to be what's going to in the end do them in. I don't think the season they're going to be able to finish the season. And as Sania said, you have to have players. Just because it's week 18 and you're having a throwaway week where you're playing a bunch of makeup games doesn't mean COVID is going to pause and nobody's going to still get infected. So, yeah, I think the league pretty much did their own selves in here.
Jerry.
I'm gonna tread lightly on how I say this, but the NFL is kind of like the closest thing to the government, and they're gonna make sure that the season ends. So, uh, it's gonna finish regardless.
Money's the bottom line. So
Yeah, it is. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I agree with, what everyone has said so far, but, maybe you could look at it as like you can put like the division teams in their own little bubble, maybe. So like, the 4 or 5 teams in each division, find out who the winner is, and then go from there. Because we've seen a couple sports, the bubble does work. Obviously, you can't put the whole league in a bubble. That's way too many people. But if you just did it by each division, it could probably work.
And I think Isaac brought up, I'm sorry, Fidel, I think Isaac brought up a great point about that. And the crazy part is, though, going back to what Walter said, the NFL had the longest time to do that. So now trying to coordinate a bubble, trying to save face for the divisional thing, which should have been an option in the first place. Now you're trying to figure that out in the matter of 7 days in which players would have to play within the 7-day period.
But I mean, my thoughts are, if you're the NFL, you should have had plans already in place in case something like this happened, because eventually you knew it would. So maybe they're not saying anything. Hopefully they do have a plan in place, maybe to have, certain teams play in one area or whatnot. So
I think they had 2 areas where they designated for a bubble, a potential
Dallas, I think Dallas is one of them, and then also Los Angeles,
so that,
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so
but that's not enough, though.
Yeah,
you need more bubbles than that.
Absolutely, and California is on lockdown. Yeah.
Well, now that you bring that up, Santa Clara County has canceled all in, sports, one-on-one sports, contact sports. So now the 49ers don't even have a place to play, and they still have 2 home games to play.
But they actually have contingencies for them at an NFL stadium, from what I was reading.
I think Arizona was an option for them, and I forget which other option over here on the West Coast still.
Yeah. Unfortunately, though, contingencies only work as well as the health of the players. Contingencies only work as well as your preventative measures that you take.
Look at the Broncos. The NFL is going to make sure that these teams play, regardless of their players.
Well, with the Broncos, they got their hand caught in the cookie jar because no one was wearing the contact bracelets, and that's why, like, hey, you guys knew what was, could happen, and now you guys got to play the game.
And then also, too,
if they were to forfeit, neither team gets paid, from what I read. So that's also another thing that we have to take into consideration. But of course, COVID is not going away. It's here to hopefully not to stay, but it's still here. So hopefully the NFL figures this out.
It's gone for me. It could stay over there in California. Texas is great.
Well, it's still around.
Yeah.
All right.
I respect it, but I don't want that evil on me, so don't put that.
Yeah, nobody does. All right. So yesterday was a really busy day actually in the NFL. So we saw that Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn were both relieved of their duties. So Walter, congratulations. You got your wish. They're both gone. I thought they should have been gone a long time ago, but now it's official. So what is next for the Detroit Lions? I'll start out with Walter on this one.
Hold on, Walter, explain it in detail, in full, from the beginning to now, right from Jim Caldwell to now, so all the audience can understand, and Coach can chime in on this.
Okay. Well, in general, I think the tone here in Detroit right now, everybody's rejoiced. They pretty much understand that Martha Ford made a huge mistake in bringing Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia here. The thing is this, listen, Jim Caldwell took over in 2014. When he took over in 2014, in those 4 years, he went 11-5, 7-9, 9-7, 9-7 before being let go after 2017. So now, just to say this quick history lesson on the Lions. I know this may be kind of ugly for people, but this organization hasn't won a playoff game since 1991. They haven't hosted a playoff game since 1993. Now, in these 30 years, from 91 to now, because this season is pretty much over with, this team has won its division only twice in 30 years. This team has made the play. This team has won 10 or more games 4 times in 30 years. So things go way beyond Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn. There's some real deep-rooted things going on in this organization. But I say this to say, well, I actually say all that to say this. That organization isn't good enough to be walking around firing winning coaches. When you lose that much, you have a lot of nerve firing a head coach with a winning record. And the problem is Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn in general, they ran this organization like it was a Madden franchise season where you take over a franchise that's winning and you say, no, you know what? I want to win my way. So I want to get rid of everybody that's here. I got to tear everything down and rebuild it from the ground up. And there was never really any intention to winning at all. They just intended to keep kicking the can down the road, winning meaningless games against bad competition to save their jobs for another week. And finally, I think the Fords figured it out. Well, Sheila Ford Hamp figured it out. I think it's a little late because I think this job would have been a lot more attractive if they would have taken Justin Herbert or if they would have taken Tua at 3 instead of taking a corner. Now you're pretty much set back another few years because you allowed a coach that you pretty much had no faith in to make that type of franchise-altering decision. So I feel like even if you did want to bring him back on consignment or whatever, you don't allow him to make that decision at number 3 overall. That decision at number 3 was a guy they figured could come in and help them play right away. But even Jeff Okudah struggled. He struggled mightily. He struggled with speed. He's struggling transitioning, his hips getting deep. So guys are out there pretty much turning Jeff around left and right. And if you look at the drafting, Matt Patricia was an awful head coach. But Bob Quinn, the GM, was even worse. And Bob Quinn, the awful GM, helped get Matt Patricia, the awful head coach, fired at the end of the day.
Coach, your thoughts on the whole situation?
Well, I think Walter said a lot of great things. For me, the football part I'll leave over there. I think this is even bigger because Jim Caldwell's name should be mentioned everywhere right now. I mean, it shows exactly what kind of coach he was. You know, to win nine games there, 9-7 twice, win 11 games. It should say something to me for my minority coaches. You know, the Eric Bieniemys of the world, the Marvin Lewis's of the world. These guys need opportunities, and you see how, I hate to say it, the good old boy network works. Guy brings in his guy, we kick out a guy who won, and here we are. Now they're getting run out. So I just hope that somebody really takes this and really shines the light on what the issues have been for minority coaches in the National Football League, because here it is again, you know, and the narrative should be what kind of coach Jim Caldwell is today, you know, and what he did do in Detroit. And so I just think it's interesting.
Yeah, that Lions team.
One thing.
Go ahead.
One thing real quick. The Fords actually love Jim Caldwell. Martha Ford loved Jim Caldwell. She wanted to keep Jim Caldwell. The thing was that Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, well, not necessarily Matt Patricia, he came after Quinn. Bob Quinn managed to sell himself to the organization, and he managed to sell himself that, hey, you know what? I'm coming from New England, and we know how to win, and we know how to do things. And these guys you have, Darius Slay, he's a bad apple. And Quandre Diggs, he's a bad apple. Those guys were not bad apples. Those guys were stand-up guys in the community. Those guys were players. Those guys were leaders. And those were guys that questioned the stupidity of this organization. And the moment you question their stupidity, they kicked both of them out of town. They didn't want anyone around with smarts at all.
And that makes it even worse.
Yes, makes it even worse because they ran them guys out of town, and then they tried to publicly portray them as malcontents.
All right. Well, obviously, there are a lot of issues with the Detroit Lions, and we'll see what they end up doing next year. I mean, biggest question mark for them is what do you do with Matt Stafford? Interested to get your thoughts on this, Walter, and Coach as well.
Well, personally, I felt Stafford should have moved on from Stafford a few years ago. I'm a big advocate of getting rid of a player early than too late. You run a risk of a player getting, especially quarterback position. Guys get beat up year after year, and like I told Jerry numerous times, I believe that the market for Stafford may be gone. You know, they continue to let him get beat up over and over year after year, kicking the can down the road, feeling that, well, if we get one more offensive lineman, or if we get one more weapon, or if we get one more D-back, or we get one more D-tackle, maybe we can win with Stafford. And I feel that Stafford is a good quarterback, but all in all, he wasn't what we needed. I think overall, we needed a different type of guy that could really save this franchise. Matthew just wasn't that guy. Matthew tried as hard as he could, but at the end of the day, Matthew just wasn't the guy that could really get this franchise over the hump.
Coach.
Well, I think he's been paid as one of the top players in the league and hasn't produced that. And I think ownership has now come out and said that the next group that comes in will decide his future. I would think any new coach and GM that's coming in would want to move on because they want to put their stamp on a guy that they believe in. And so I just think it's going to be a situation that's going to be fluid over the next several months and who gets the job. But I don't see him staying there as a quarterback.
Jerry.
Man, I just think that this would be a great opportunity for somebody like Louis Riddick to maybe perhaps step in and start to build the right, team building concept and bring in the right coaching staff, and they can establish the right winning culture. And I think that, that's the best route. I think I even, excuse me, I think I read a story where Bob Quinn was lobbying to one of the coaches to tank that season. Which when I read that, I was like, "What in the world?" I thought that was just fans talking. You know what I mean? I would never expect an
That's
The
actual.
crazy.
question is this: if you want taking, what the hell do you consider what you've been doing for the last 3 years? Like, I mean,
Well,
honestly,
no,
what do you
no, yeah,
consider 13, 29, and 1?
no, yeah. No, that I understand, but for a GM to kind of like intentionally tell the coach like, "Hey, let's not win this year." Like, I thought that I was,
I'm
I
telling you,
thought that was
Matt
always.
Patricia didn't need any help.
Well, he didn't, but I
He didn't
said.
need any help losing.
But
So,
that's the chatter that you hear from fans, not from a general manager standpoint.
No.
So
oh,
it'd be interesting. I hope that Louis Riddick does get taken serious. I think that him working as a broadcast, working in the booth, right? Because now
Yeah. Monday Night Football.
Monday Night Football, and him being an analyst, like during for the ESPN. Man, I think that he's ready to answer all the questions, and he's so professional, so precise, and he knows the game so well, and he played the game. So I think that he'd be a prime candidate for this job. I mean, Walter, I think me and Walter had a good conversation about this. He's like, who in the hell wants to come to Detroit? So
I mean,
I don't know.
if you look at the current situation of the organization, you got a beat up, expensive quarterback, and the cupboard's pretty much bare. Quinn spent the last few years drafting bad, failing on a lot of second round picks, a lot of third round picks. That's where you build your team at. So if you fail on a bunch of second, third, and fourth round picks, what type of franchise do you really expect to have?
Sandia, let me get your thoughts on this as well.
I think everything has been perfectly laid out just between coach, between Walter. I think that Louis Riddick should also get a chance. I mean, at the end of the day, the Lions don't have anything to lose except games. And right now, clearly they need to make a turnaround. And I think that Louis Riddick could possibly be that next option for them. Clearly, they're not really good on their past options. So we got to move forward and look forward.
Thank you, Sandia. And Isaac.
Yeah, there's not much more to say. You guys have all said pretty much all of it. What you need to do, though, is you need to keep the guys that belong on the team. So, like, keep the Galladay, keep TJ Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift, build around that. I know it sucks, starting over and stuff, but like Walter said, you got rid of Darius Slay and Quandre Diggs when you didn't need to get rid of them. So you need to keep the right guys. It's a big free agency coming up, big draft coming up too. So you just got to do it right. It's going to take a couple of years, but if you do it right, it'll pan out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great individuals that I think would do a great job there in Detroit. Reggie McKenzie, I think, deserves another chance, former GM of the Raiders. And then also Thomas Dimitroff. That's another name I would keep an eye on. Look, he did a great job when he was with the Falcons. Obviously, we know it wasn't the players, right, because they started playing harder after Dan Quinn was fired from the Falcons. So we'll see what the Lions end up doing. But there are a lot of great candidates out there.
I will say this: Dimitrov would be an awesome pickup. That guy's just you really don't know what to expect from that GM.
Yeah.
But I will say this: I think that he said that he was going to take a year off. He's going to go on a soul searching. Because he's not like us, or
He's gonna go drink. No, I'm joking.
He's gonna go get right mind, body, and soul. That's what he said. So
hey, but one thing I will say to add to the coaching talk, Joe Brady. Now, if Louis Riddick does get offered the job, and if Louis Riddick would take the job, I think Joe Brady may be his decision at coach. He's raved about Joe Brady a lot for the past couple of years. So I think Joe Brady is a huge candidate. Brady's done a pretty good job in Carolina, considering the fact that he hasn't had his starting tackle all season, pretty much no Okung. He hasn't had McCaffrey, and he still managed to keep that offense pretty much middle of the pack everywhere. And a couple other guys, I think Matt Campbell, Iowa State head coach, he's a guy whose name has a lot of steam over the past year. Urban Meyer, there was rumors about Urban Meyer, and also I think Pete Carmichael, the offensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints, who I think would be a no-brainer considering the amount of work he's done in New Orleans with that offense. And as a quarterback's coach, it all depends on the direction the new GM wants to go in. Does he want to go defense, or does he want to go full-fledged offense? So,
hey, I got one name for you for head coach, Jim Harbaugh.
oh man, don't
see, and I even laughed when I said that.
No.
Yeah, I was expecting that reaction from you. That's funny.
Harbaugh. Although I believe I think Harbaugh would be better in the NFL than he is in college. But no, Harbaugh can stay 40 miles. He can stay 40 miles west of where I'm at.
I think he might be a head coach somewhere in the NFL next year, but we'll see. All right. Hey, that was great, Coach Jackson Walter. Awesome talk, and we'll see what the Lions end up doing. All right. Fantasy playoffs are coming up. Isaac, we need your help. Who do we sit? Who do we start? Who do we pick up?
All right. So there's a lot going on today. Like you said, playoffs are coming up soon. So I'm going to start with the starts. My quarterbacks are two quarterbacks going against each other today, Josh Allen and Justin Herbert. Allen has been on fire as of late. In his last two games, he's posted 36 points and 29.36 PPR points, respectively. And the Chargers do not defend the pass well. They allow the 8th most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. And then going over to Herbert, he's simply automatic when it comes to scoring more than 20 fantasy points each week. I think he's missed 20 fantasy points just once, and that was in his second career start. So like I said earlier on Thursday, with or without his long hair, he continues to prove he should be considered one of the offensive rookies of the year. So big numbers from both quarterbacks. Other notables, Cam Newton against Arizona and Derek Carr against Atlanta. Fidel, I figured you'd like that. For running backs, Miles Sanders looks good on paper. There's something going on in Philly. There's something going on with Carson Wentz. I think Wentz and the Eagles desperately need a big game out of Sanders. Seattle's allowed the 10th most fantasy points to running backs, and Wentz has just been absolutely terrible as of late. The game plan should be to run the ball and keep the ball out of Wentz's hands as much as possible. So expect a big game out of Sanders. And then another one is the guy coming off of a concussion. He plays for the Chicago Bears, so they're riding a 4-game losing streak. There's been poor play from the quarterbacks, and there's been a lack of rushing attack. But Green Bay's weakness is the run, defending the run. So David Montgomery looks good for this week. He hasn't, been too consistent this year, but we see it each and every week. The Packers just don't defend the run well. Other good matchups, Nick Chubb at Jacksonville, Brian Hill replacing Todd Gurley against the Raiders, and then Gus Edwards, if that game does happen on Tuesday, he is the only available back out of that trio going against Pittsburgh, so he looks good too. For wide receivers, Curtis Samuel, I think it's time to finally start trusting Samuel. He's been an absolute machine lately. And last week he posted 21.4 PPR points, and that's the third time in his last 4 games he's produced at least 20 fantasy points. So in the last 4 weeks, he's produced 73.8 PPR points combined, which is good enough for the 11th best wide receiver during that span. And it helps that Minnesota has given up the 4th most fantasy points to his position this year. Sticking with Minnesota, Adam Thielen looks to be out with COVID, or he's on the COVID list. And so it looks like Justin Jefferson should have a big game. He's usually a must start, but he's a lock this week. He's been pretty good lately. He's coming off of back-to-back weeks of more than 16 PPR fantasy points. So this is an easy call. Other notables, Michael Pittman Jr. against Tennessee, DJ Moore against Minnesota, and Nelson Aguilar against Atlanta. For my starts, Darren Waller's my top tight end this week against Atlanta. He's been a machine as well. He caught all 7 of his targets last week for 88 yards and a touchdown. He should have another solid game, and Atlanta's the worst at defending tight ends this year. So I expect, 10, 15 at the minimum for him. Hunter Henry also looks good. He's been quietly one of the most reliable tight ends in fantasy the last couple of weeks. In the last 2 weeks, he's caught 8 of his 13 targets for 78 yards, 2 touchdowns for a combined 27.8 fantasy points. So like Herbert, Henry should have a solid performance. Other tight ends, Robert Tonyan under the radar against Chicago, Mike Gesicki at the Jets, and then one of the top free agent ads, Jordan Reed against the Rams. He looks fully healthy for the first time in a while. Defenses, the Dolphins going against the Jets. Each and every week, I put a defense in here that's taken on the Jets, and usually they pan out. The Dolphins took on New York earlier in the year, and they had 15 fantasy points. And then my other defense is the Saints. They're going against that Broncos team, so you might as well put them in there. Denver doesn't even know who their quarterback's going to be. Should be a sloppy game. Should be a lot of fantasy points for New Orleans. Now on to my sits. Ryan Tannehill against the Colts does not look good on paper. He's only posted 20-plus fantasy points just 4 times this season. And his last outing against the Colts, he had 10.7 fantasy points, so go ahead and bench him. Melvin Gordon doesn't look good. I know there's not a lot going on in Denver. They're going to give Gordon the ball, but expect New Orleans to expect Gordon to touch the ball a ton. And New Orleans is still riding that 53-game streak of not allowing a 100-yard rusher. For wide receivers, sit Marquez Valdes-Scantling. The speedy receiver who saved and lost the game last week comes in with an Achilles injury. He does look like he's going to play. He's questionable. But even if he does play, Chicago's not a great matchup for him. The Bears have given up the 3rd fewest fantasy points to wide receivers this season, and he's never played well against them. In 4 career games against Chicago, he's only caught 5 passes for 64 yards and no touchdowns. Tight end, I'm sitting Mark Andrews this week. I know that's kind of shocking, but I got a couple of reasons why. His starting quarterback, Lamar Jackson's out this week. The team may not even play due to COVID-19 complications. And on top of that, he's dealing with a thigh injury that may limit his production. So just for safety measures, I would go ahead and bench Andrews this week against a tough Pittsburgh Steelers defense. And then the defense to sit this week is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The defense looks bad lately, and they'll have a tough task at stopping Mahomes and electrifying Chiefs. So my rule of thumb with the defenses, always start the defense playing the Jets and always bench the defense taking on the Chiefs. That wraps it up for your Week 12 fantasy advice.
All right, Isaac, thank you so much. And then also quick notes. Julio Jones and Todd Gurley are both officially out. And also, Jalen Hurts was taking first-team snaps with the Eagles before their showdown with the Seattle Seahawks tomorrow night.
I'm so excited to see that. Oh, I'm so excited.
All right.
They've been working him in slowly into the offense. So
they have, and I think he's really gonna want to redeem himself from any doubts that anybody had from him in college, and just be able to really get out there and on the field and show what he has. He plays with a lot of heart, man.
Yeah.
Well, there just seems to be something wrong with Wentz. He just doesn't look right out there, and he's making a lot of mental mistakes. And this is easily his worst year in the pros right now.
Yeah, we'll see what they end up deciding to do tomorrow night against the Seattle Seahawks. All right, bold predictions. Start off with Coach.
Chicago goes to Green Bay with Mitchell Trubisky and upsets the pack.
I think that is my favorite bold prediction you've ever given, Coach.
I hope. Oof.
That's bold.
Man,
All right.
That was back weeks for the Packers going down.
Sania.
So actually, I was gonna bring up a bold prediction for that, but I don't. With this rivalry game every year, I do not say a prediction because I just have a feeling that it's always gonna go against me. But I do have bold predictions for the AFC South, being that the Colts take the Titans. They beat the Titans. That is a bold prediction here. We'll see how that goes. But also, this is kind of a bold, kind of a lock. It's a bold lock, I guess. With Burrow being out, I think the Giants, they tie for first in the NFC East. Not saying much, but they tie for first in the NFC East, and they beat the Bengals.
All right, Walter.
Well, my bold prediction goes right back to what Sania just said, but I'm going to take the Giants over the Bengals.
Jerry.
Gotta pick somebody. You know, one of those teams have to win the game. So I'm going to go with the Giants. I think the Giants are healthier right now, and the Giants are more stable at quarterback.
Was I not clear? I'm also picking the Giants, so we in the same boat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have that's my lock to win was the Giants, and
That's my lock too.
Yeah, so it's like you guys kind of messed me up, but it's all good. And then Fidel kind of messed me up earlier too because my bold prediction was that now that that Jalen Hurts is getting the first team reps, then he's gonna start playing more. That the chance the Eagle fans, the ruthless Eagle fans, are gonna start calling for Jalen Hurts to start. And after today's performance, I was gonna expect for Jalen Hurts to put up some good numbers, and from there be actually named the starter towards the end of the season.
Isaac.
My bold prediction is that the Saints will beat the Broncos by more than 25. Taysom Hill will have 3 touchdowns, and New Orleans will snap their 26-year losing streak to Denver. And they've only played them 5 times in 26 years. But yeah, they haven't beat them since 1994.
All right, and then we got Kendall's bold prediction. Colts will hold Henry to under 60 yards rushing.
That is a bold. We'll see.
Buckner's not playing.
Yeah.
DeForest ain't playing. All right, we'll see. And then my bold prediction is the Chargers upset the Buffalo Bills. All right. Lock to win. Start with Coach.
Lock to win. Seattle will beat the Philadelphia Eagles.
Sania.
Coach has that one. I'm gonna add to that with the Cardinals beating the Patriots. And this is technically considered bold a lock since we're just mixing it up here. I'm gonna say that the Chiefs beat the Buccaneers by at least a touchdown.
Walter.
I'm going to go with the Raiders. Raiders over the Falcons. I think the Falcons are mentally done. They've checked out. I also believe, going back to Carson Wentz, I think what's going on in Philadelphia, at least from what I'm hearing, radio-wise, television-wise, city-wise, that town has completely turned on Wentz. And if you think about it, when you watch, I think Isaac, when he touched on it, a lot of the mental mistakes Wentz is making, to me, Wentz is playing like a guy that's mentally not there anymore. And I think regardless of how much players say they don't read newspapers, they don't listen to the radio, they don't watch TV, when you live in a town and your town is turned on you, you hear it. So I think that's a big issue there too. And I think that's what's going on in Atlanta. Julio's done. Not done, but Julio's pretty much going to get shut down for the season. Todd Gurley has given them nothing. The Raiders are good right now. I think the Raiders are right on the cusp of being that third best team. They're just missing a few pieces, but today I think there's no way they lose to the Falcons. Don't prove me wrong, Fidel.
Hey, don't tell me, tell them. Knock on wood. All right. Jerry and Isaac, I believe you guys have the same one, right?
Yeah, the Giants over the Bengals to claim. And I was going to say, out of this, I think the Giants are going to be the actual NFC East division winners.
We weren't saying that at the beginning of the season.
I know.
Crazy times. And we got Kendall. Lock prediction. Brady throws 2 pick six. I knew that was coming.
Man, so predictable, Kendall.
And then my lock to win, the Rams over the Niners. The Rams look pretty good. They might be the best team in that division. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. All right, but that's going to wrap up our show for today. Thank you, everyone out there, for watching, and enjoy the games.